Hi, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to Soul Treats Live on Sunday. It's a little bit rainy here in Vancouver, but I'm so excited for today. We're going to have Adventures for Connection who are going to be on, and they're going to be discussing fear and how to overcome. And I'm so excited. I'm going to bring them on shortly. And I just want to take this moment in time just to give my gratitude and thank you everyone for connecting with Soul Treats and really helping the page grow quite a bit. Please remember to follow the page so that you can definitely get all the information that's coming in November. And there are also going to be lots of stuff that's happening in November too. So I'm going to turn this over to Tanja, who's going to be on, and Sylvia. And also Zach will be here as well, as Zach is going to work through the fear. So let me bring them on. Hi, Tanja. How's it going? Thank you so much for being here.
No, thank you for having us. We're so excited.
You're welcome. Yeah. Hi, Sylvia.
Hi, Michelle.
Thanks so much for being here. I'm going to turn the show over to both of you, and then we'll bring Zach on for your demonstration. And thank you once again. It's always a pleasure to have everyone that likes to be on and helping humanity. So thank you so much for your kindness and your generosity on this.
Thank you for hosting. Yeah. Hi, Sylvia.
Hey, Tanja.
Hi, it's Tanja from Powell Painting. That's funny. Powell Painting and Adventures for Connection. And today we're on Soul Treats for this very special event. And Sylvia and I've been doing a few live chats, so to speak, around the topic of fear because it seems to be a really strong one right now. Sylvia, do you want to just give us a little bit of a background on where you are and how'd you come to be where you are now?
Sure. Oh, hi, Cindy. So my name is Sylvia. I am a hypnotherapist. I've been a hypnotherapist for about 10 years now, and I specialize in sports hypnosis, of all things. And then I also am a business person. So I've worked mostly in startups in an operations or management capacity for since about 2014. So both like sports and business are places where, believe it or not, there is a great deal of fear. And one of my favorite things working on is fear. One, because it's actually pretty easy to work through, believe it or not. There are lots of really good ways to deal with it. Hi, Ivy. That are quick and painless, and last. So that's like my little primer about fear and how really inconsequential it is, although it seems really important at the time. I don't know, like I'm happy to dig in with our guest. I don't know if you want to chat any more, Tanja, before we do that, but it's up to you.
I just wanted to say that fear is one of the emotions we have, and it is an emotion, and just like the waves in an ocean, they come and they go, and they are always in movement. So yeah, let's dig right in with Zach. Michelle, is Zach here?
Zach is here, and let me just bring him on, and I'd like to say just a couple of things about Zach.
Of course.
Hey, Zach.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you so much for being here, and I just wanted to just give a shout out to Zach for being here this morning. And I just wanted to let you know, Zach, as I mentioned in my message to you, thank you so much for being so open to evolve in your life. I don't know if you even realize how inspiring that is. So I just want to thank you so much for being you, and thank you for being here this morning.
I appreciate that so much. Thank you very much for having me. And I'm really excited to see what's going to unfold today. So.
So this is this isn't a new situation for me because I've never done a live really in this kind of a context. And so I'll preface what we're going to do by just saying it'll be different from what we would do if you came to see me, say, at the clinic. Because I'm a professional and part of an association that regulates as much as I can hypnotherapy. There's all kinds of paperwork that we would do. I would be doing an assessment, and and we do consent and all of that. So this won't be, we're not going to go through a hypnotherapeutic session today like we would in a clinic. But we'll draw from our shared experience to see what we can work with in the here and now.
Yeah.
And we'll see what form that takes. I haven't planned anything. I just like to work with what we have in the moment. And so, thank you so much for coming, Zach, and for being open to this unplanned and, hopefully inspiring experience. Tell me a little bit about why you wanted to be here today, and if there's something in particular that you were hoping to delve into.
Okay, so first of all, I would just say that I was invited last night, and I didn't really know what this was going to be about. I saw Adventures for Connection, and so I thought that would be some kind of adventure regarding connection. I didn't actually realize it was going to be about fear. And so coming onto this now, I'm realizing it's actually about fear. I just kind of tapped into myself to see what is it that I'm holding on to right now that I'm perhaps in fear of. Is that really what I should be bringing here right now?
Up to you. Like, choose your own adventure. I think probably what I'm thinking about, what other people might be interested in, since we have a bit of an audience. And I'm thinking that what's probably interesting for people is seeing how fear can dissolve, or just like ways to approach fear in ourselves. So if there is like an actual fear, you seem like a very, very self-regulated person as it is. You obviously meditate and you do a lot of inner work. I can see that. So people like you actually often don't have a lot of problems with fear, because you've already learned how to master at least the sort of physiological responses, for example. But you may still have fears, or you may just like reflect on a fear that you used to have, and we could talk through how you overcame it. I think either of those would be a good place to start.
Sure. Okay. Just to be completely vulnerable then, I suppose, really, is that generally in my day-to-day life, I tend not to have any fear as such, but I find for me personally, the kind of fear that comes up for me is when I'm coming into like a romantic partnership. And I know that's true for so many of us, where those triggers don't really come up until that romantic kind of intimacy really starts happening. And then as the love starts to build, it's like those trapped emotions that wouldn't otherwise come to the surface have no choice but to come to the surface in the presence of that like exchange and that shared love. And so a recent experience for me was connecting with someone and having feelings for them. And it's not just been once, it's actually something that I've had to work on a lot over the past 3 years. And it ties in so much with rejection for me personally. So like how I've overcome that is this fear of like, this fear of being chosen over, I suppose, like me getting feelings for this person and then there not being anything concrete between us. Because it's usually that when I'm actually in the relationship and like we're good, I tend not to have an issue. It's really only when it's that kind of pre-phase, especially in a long distance relationship, which has been a theme for me as well, where it's that uncertainty, it's that fear has been what I've needed to focus on. And so for me personally, how I've dealt with that is, as an emotional healing coach as well, it's like my own tools for that is just something will happen. I'll have a fear come up, and usually it's not grounded in reality. It's not grounded in what the other person has said or done, really. It's usually some kind of fantastical like illusion that will be bred from my ego and my mind and is just not based in reality. And that will then create that emotional response of fear, that anxiety, that kind of like uncertainty, that worry. And it's all rooted in fear ultimately as the base emotion. And so what I found in those circumstances when I'm feeling that, when I'm really anxious and like nervous, is just to start breathing first of all. And so through that breath work, just letting the breath come in. And usually for me, the fear it can appear in different parts of my body. So, and I know specifically it will be the heart and the solar plexus and even the sacral as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I breathe into that, I'll be breathing into that area where that fear is. And let's say, for example, it's the solar plexus. Breathe in and then breathe out. And with this breath, I'll let the emotion expand. And I'll be breathing and breathing until I come to a state of calmness. And when I'm in that state of calmness, then I'll start bringing in positive reinforcement, usually in the form of like love. So like love energy, just like projecting love into my solar plexus, for example.
How do you do that, Zach? Tell me how you project love into your solar plexus. Is that an image that you're using in your mind, or like describe that for us? Because I think that's helpful.
Usually one of two ways. So like affirmation and like verbal affirmation, visual affirmation, and then thirdly as well, intentional feeling. So this is really good timing. So I'm writing my course at the moment. So it's like not.
Yeah, no, that's cool.
So what I found the most powerful for me personally to do this has been verbal affirmation. So like, I love you, or just love, and focusing on love. And there's a whole list of like different affirmations that I would use depending on whether it's like anger, sadness, or fear, or whether it's one of the three traumas: abandonment, rejection, or abuse. And just all different kinds of verbal affirmations, but like especially like I love you, and just intending for love. And with that, I sometimes, with using visualization and using the mind, I've found really good effect with visualizing a version of myself using my mind, whether I'm in the first person or the third person, and just kind of like embracing that version of myself that is in pain with a hug, and just like giving him a hug and like telling him it's okay. Combining that with the I love you affirmation or love you affirmation. And thirdly as well is intention. So when I'm breathing in, I'm intending to breathe in all of the love energy in my local vicinity into my heart and into that area. And then when I'm breathing out, I'm just kind of just letting it out, but breathing in again and breathing it in. So I'm really intending and feeling that love to enter my body. And those three things combined really. So the I love you affirmation, the visualization of like hugging my inner child and feeling that at the same time. And then also thirdly, feeling love enter into me and manifesting that.
Okay, thanks. So Zach just gave us a beautiful, beautiful imagery and like a step-by-step process that actually anybody could use in that situation. Here's what's remarkable though about this approach that you didn't even mention, and I think is worth pointing out to people. What you didn't do when you felt fear at the beginning of a romantic relationship, potential relationship, long distance relationship, what you didn't do is ask the other person to do that for you. And I think that's with fear, particularly around romance, that is a landmine or a something that people often fall upon, is that feeling any kind of insecurity, and then very quickly jumping to, even if it's a brand new relationship, that it's the other person's job to make me feel secure. And it's not, right? It's your job. really. I mean, the beauty of relationships is there are times where we can hold and support one another and, make each other feel safe. But to start, especially at the beginning, especially if you know that the fear that you're experiencing may come from your own past, right? Or from your own unique experience, then, that's really your stuff. And so by taking on that responsibility, that's what I wanted to acknowledge, Zach. I think that's really mature and beautiful of you that you didn't even consider, that asking that other person to provide that sense of comfort and safety for you. You actually generated it for yourself. And I think that's a really empowering message that everybody can relate to and take with them from today.
Absolutely. I'm really sorry. My internet here cut out for like a period when you first started talking then.
Okay.
But I think I got the gist of what you said there. Is basically not to project the emotions that we're feeling and just take responsibility for that. And I mean, yeah. I, for one, I know I do my best. And in the past 3 years of trial and error, I've come to this point where I'm better at doing that than ever before, but there's still times I notice where I'll slip up, and that's okay. It's just acknowledge that, be aware of that, right? And just do your best not to continue doing it. So yeah. And just it's taking that time out as well. What I've noticed is take the time away and like step away from the situation to be able to focus on the emotion and give it the time and healing it needs before you do something you might regret.
Yeah, exactly. We could dig in a little more into how to make that decision, I guess, of like what moves to make. But because I want to keep somewhat focused on our theme of fear and what's going to be sort of practical and useful for other people. And I think I want to use what you described as a template that we can now give to our listeners. To say that what Zach has done is exactly what I would recommend, which is that in any hypnotherapy session, before we do any work in like creating suggestions and imagery for people to like get them from point A to point B, whatever it is they're trying to tackle, we would first create a safe space. And actually that comes from the client. They provide the imagery for that safe space. There are generic examples that pretty much work for everyone. One is like a very clean room, like a beautiful room of your own choosing, like a bedroom that's really cozy. Maybe everything's white and it's really bright and there's like sunlight streaming through, or maybe it's just like it's a cozy room like you remember growing up if you had positive memories. That doesn't work for everybody, so it's like really got to be of your own design. But you can create a room. Could be a room on a spaceship, like really could be anything. Or it could be, for some people, it's like lying on the beach. Lying on the beach and it's the perfect temperature and the sun is shining, but there's some nice palm fronds shading your face. You're in a hammock or you're lying on the sand. The temperature's just right. It's not too hot, not too cold. You can hear the ocean, the waves crashing, that beautiful rhythmic, that sound that reminds us of being safe, close to Mother Earth. It's interesting, the shushing sound of waves. It's suggested that the reason that is so, well, there's a couple things, but one of the reasons that might be so soothing for us is because when we're in the womb, the blood of our mother rushing around the womb is actually quite a loud shushing sound. And obviously in rhythm with the mother's heartbeat. And so the sound of the ocean, which is can also be quite like a roaring, loud, crashing sound, is similar to that sound. So when we're safe in that space, we hear that, and you can actually soothe babies by shushing into their ears. Anyhow, the point is you can make your safe space, whatever resonates with you. Sometimes it's just the most relaxing place you've ever been. And then imagining that space as with as many of your senses as possible: sight, sound, smell, touch, bringing in all of the sensations. Most people will have an easier time doing this with eyes closed, and just allowing, you know, yourself to hear and feel those changes in your own body when you imagine yourself in that space. And then if we were going to work on a fear, we would be taking you to like steps of what that fear could look like. And then always coming back to making sure we keep the sensation of the safe space. And once you can be like, kind of see both at the same time, or like feel both at the same, like you can't feel both at the same time, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So once you can imagine the fearful trigger while maintaining that sense of calm, peace, relaxation, and safety, the fear is gone. You can't have both at the same time, right? So the key is like that anchor of a relaxing, safe space and being able to bring yourself back there. Now that's something that not everybody can do, just like that, even with the instructions that I just gave. They might need some help, and probably some of the work that you do, actually, it sounds like, is very similar. Like you would be helping people understand how to get from where they're at to that safe space, and then using that as a context for working with other things. Does that sound right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's just kind of, it's exactly the same thing, just describing it in a slightly different way. So I've noticed that as a common theme. It's all coming at the same kind of angle. But yeah, absolutely, what you just said, that's really, really powerful as well. Like, you're absolutely right. It's the same, for example, where I said about using the like love affirmation in that way to like bring that love into the emotion. It's like where you've got that fear, and that fear is here and it's got that much power. And then you're in that safe place and that calmness of that safe place. And when they meet in the middle, it's like the fear gets canceled out. And they're both just, it's, yeah.
Yeah, it can kind of like, it's like the love and the calm like actually wraps around the fear, and it just kind of like dissolves, evaporates, right? It's like the sun shining on a wet piece of concrete, and it just like the water just yeah. So it's a pleasant release. I'm just looking at the comments and seeing Abir has said, when we don't know what it is we fear. Some people confuse fear and factor of security. Yeah. So one of the things I think is worth touching on, thanks. Yeah. Is, like, where does fear come from? Like in your experience, Zach, we can go to that specific example, but like, where did the fear come from?
Comes from a state of lack, and often in human cases, it would come from childhood trauma and even ancestral trauma and even past life trauma, where, yeah, and ultimately it always is going to come back to a state of lack, a state of the opposite of love.
Yeah. So we like always distinguish between fears and phobias. We, meaning like clinical hypnotherapists, we would distinguish between a fear and a phobia. A phobia is like how horses are afraid of snakes without ever having seen a snake before. A phobia, and people have phobias of spiders often. A phobia is like a very present fear reaction that has no, it has no stimulant, like there was no sensitizing event in that person's life. It's just there. And it's irrational, and it's like, it tends to be quite like a strong feeling that impacts them, and where they go like immediately into fight or flight. And then a fear we would look at as something that had some kind of event attached to it, or like some kind of cause that may or may not be conscious, may or may not be remembered, but that has a cause. And we would treat those things differently. Yeah. And I will say too, like, it doesn't, well, I'll ask you this. Does it matter? Does it matter where it started? or where it comes from when it comes to dealing with it? Do we need to know why we're afraid?
From my experience, I would say, and what I've learned, the mental body and the rationalization and logicalization of knowing why and where and how can help. It can be of assistance, but really the emotional body is where the treasure is at, from what I've learned and understood and experienced. So the fear, for example, let's say it's rooted in a chakra system, or it's rooted in an organ. And that can come from a childhood trauma that we may not even remember because we perhaps were like 2 years old, for example. So I would say it's your question was, and no, it doesn't really, we don't really have to know. All we really need to be able to focus on is the emotion. The mental body is not so much of an important thing in that regard, in my perspective.
Yeah. I think we feel that there's been I think in psychology there's been a narrative for a long time that if we can, and this really came from the work of Freud, right? That if we can uncover the inception of an issue, then that bringing that to consciousness will absolve the issue. I have not found that to be true in my own experience, and in watching other people, and we can kind of over therapize ourselves into trying to uncover the exact moment. What I will say is that we can do work to go back in time, often using the feeling as like a starting point, blowing up that feeling really big, and then finding out and then sending somebody back to where that initiated. And very often when we do that, it is a memory that they have suppressed or forgotten, and they're very surprised to learn where it came from. Yeah. And it's kind of fun, like it's kind of interesting, right? But that's not what helps them resolve it. What helps resolve it is then taking that experience and then using different forms of imagery to empower the person in that situation. Another like kind of way of dealing with this that I think you'll find interesting, Zach, is like we do like a timeline. We can do a timeline exercise. It's similar to what you said about giving a hug to your inner child. We can go back to a past memory that's caused us fear, and we can have you kind of like float along the timeline into your past above it as your adult self, and see the situation from a third person perspective playing out, but then pausing it and then going in as your adult self to fix the situation or to comfort you in that situation. Actually fixing the situation and turning the hands of time and the clock back and then resetting it to what it should have been is an extremely healing experience for people. And when they come out of that experience, because the subconscious doesn't distinguish imagery from reality, like it's all the same. So when they've imagined deeply, especially in hypnosis or in trance, which I'm sure your clients also go into trance all the time, whether you're intending it or not. When people come out of that, to them internally, it's like it happened that way. Like the version that they created becomes their past from an emotional kind of perspective. And that can be a very deeply life-changing experience of being able to let go, right, of something that is maybe impacting our emotions, our behavior, even our sleep and things like that in the present, that was from long ago.
So powerful. Absolutely. Yeah.
Can I just add that kids are meaning making machines. Kids are just trying to figure out, where do I fit in on this? How you're just learning, right? And so it's interesting to actually physically go back and and correct that. And I love what you were saying about that, Sylvia. So yeah, that was beautiful.
Thanks, Tanja. Yeah, we're all meaning-making machines, aren't we? We're all meaning-making machines. We're still meaning-making machines as adults too. But yes, kids are they're creating a life script as all the way up to about age sort of 12 is like when it tends to like really get locked in. And that becomes a template for the rest of their life. And fear, can figure into that largely and prevent people from making all kinds of choices that might be beneficial to them. I'm conscious of time. I don't even know how long. Are we going for an hour? Or I want to make sure that we do whatever we're intending to do today. We don't let anybody down.
Yeah. Why don't we see if anyone in the notes or on Facebook who's commenting, does anyone have any questions or something you would like us to address and discuss? We would love to bring you in on that.
There's Nita.
And in the meantime, yes. Hi, Nita. I can't see everyone for some reason. So Michelle, we might need your help on this a little bit because I see some comments pop up, but they're not on the feed I'm on.
I can look at the comments in the sidebar, and then some of them are popping up, and I think that's probably Michelle like coordinating which ones actually show up on the screen. I could be wrong. That's a guess.
No, I got it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I don't see any questions here, but I mean, again, we could take this it's such a huge topic. So, and you've probably already figured this out, Zach, and I think we probably have a similar approach, but like the way I tend to work with these things, or what I hope is like helpful for people, is like practical kind of techniques and tips that they can like take away and use or experiment with. I will say that when it comes to fear, the one caveat about working on it alone is really making sure you do have that like safe space, well thought out and like well anchored. And you probably, like, I'm not going to say don't work on fear alone. But I'm just saying, your mileage is going to vary depending on how acute your self-regulation abilities are, and how able you are to focus your own mind. Like, do you do meditation with that, intent? Because the one thing about fear is that like if you genuinely trigger your own fear, if you go into like fight or flight, unless you've practiced it, it may be hard for you to get yourself to a state of calm again. So that's the one caution that I would say is like, especially if you tend towards the anxious side of the spectrum, which in this day and age, I would say like the majority of people do. It's like our nervous systems are just wound up like beyond belief all the time. So I would say like, if you're going to experiment with any of this stuff, if there's any part of you that feels like you need guidance, reach out and get some guidance to work through it. If you're feeling like you have that already kind of within you, then go ahead and experiment, or maybe like in the presence of somebody that you trust, or like around a friend, or like have a plan, like just set a timer, like something like that, just to give yourself like the right environment to do that in. Yeah.
Can we chat a little bit about tapping into what I always like to say, fear of the future? So there's a saying that says, if you're thinking about the past too much, you're depressed. You're thinking about the future too much, you're anxious or afraid of it. So how could somebody move through that given the current climate these days? What would be helpful around that topic? Just about fear of the future.
Well, you kind of nailed it. I mean, because you talked about the past and you talked about the future, but you didn't talk about the present. And there's never, so mindfulness is the answer to that 100%. Practicing mindfulness, however you want to go about that. There's so many different approaches right now, but I would recommend that everybody have some type of mindfulness practice. And it is practice. It's something that we need to routinely do, because again, like it's not just that, like, humans naturally have lots of fear. I think it was Mikio Keiko who said that we're the scared monkeys of the universe. It's how we survived. We jumped into trees and we hid and we planned, and it was fear that motivated us to do that. And so we have like a legacy of fear that goes back millions of years. Okay, so fear is a normal part of human existence, and it's kept us alive. So we can be friends with it. It's not, it's there. There's sometimes fears that are there for very good reasons that we wouldn't even want to dissipate, but we're talking about the kind of anxiety that can overtake us that has to do with things that haven't even happened or may not be even likely to occur. Practicing mindfulness, which is attending to what's going on moment to moment in the present, is a very good antidote for that. And like a quick one that I like, which was taught by Milton Erickson's wife, actually. Milton Erickson was like a premier kind of godfather of like modern hypnotherapy, and a doctor, and his wife was also quite brilliant and contributed to some of his body of work. And her technique is one you may have come across before as well, but it's like the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique. So when you're feeling any kind of sensation or bad feeling, and fear could be one, just stop and notice 5 things that you can see, 5 things that you can hear, and 5 things that you can feel. So that's like, the visual one's pretty easy. I think hearing is also pretty easy. Feeling means like sensation. So like, I feel the bed that I'm sitting on. I can feel my finger and my thumb touching each other. And then once you've done the 5, you do 4 things that you can see, 4 things you can hear, and 4 things you can feel. And it takes a fair amount of, it sounds easy, but it actually requires a lot of attentiveness and sort of sensation radar to get to that many. And by the time you get down to 1, you will have changed your state. It's inevitable that you will have changed your state. And so that kind of any technique like that to bring us back to the present is a good antidote for that future like fear stuff. And again, I would reinforce that mindfulness. I've heard lots of people say that, once they've been meditating or like doing training for years, they don't like need to do it anymore because everything's mindfulness. And I don't buy it personally. You need dedicated time. I mean, again, it could be 5 minutes, but I believe that to keep that ability tuned to kind of zoom in, zoom out, to decide how, like, whether we want to be in mindfulness or thinking about the past, like to even have that ability to notice, requires practice and training on a daily basis, ideally. And even if it's just 5 minutes, just making space for that. And if you're new, like, yeah, work with a teacher if you can too. I'm a big advocate of that. But yeah, does that resonate with you too? I feel like I've been talking a lot.
No, that was perfect. And I think another type of fear we could talk about too is, let's talk about the sport one, right? So say mountain biking, for example, for me, and I'm going down features that I've not done before. And I certainly don't want to get injured. And so I tend to take a deep breath. I do a little thing on my bike, even when I get on, like I'm present, I got my helmet on, I got this, then I'm like, surround myself in white light, me and my bike, and just be really present on my bike. But I have a limit where if I'm afraid, I'm like, well, I'm not doing that today. I'm going to walk it.
Yeah.
So any other advice around that?
Well, I want to just highlight what you said. And this is like, from my experience working with athletes, and I particularly worked with athletes in high risk and adventure sports, right? So a lot of danger, like actual physical danger. Why I like that area, I don't know. I've used to rock climb quite a bit myself, so I think that's what got me into adrenaline sports. And some of us love that dopamine. And fear is like, actually, it's feeling fear is not actually what we crave. It's the release of dopamine that happens afterwards that we get addicted to, which is interesting. But like the fear is actually necessary for that whole transaction to occur. So there are those among us, particularly with the D2DR dopamine receptor, that actually will seek out things that cause us fear because of the reward that we get after. What's really important, I think, about what you said, and I imagine whether you're conscious of this or not, you do probably do some imagery work and visualization before you go down a mountain biking route, for example, and you can kind of imagine like exactly how it will feel. And if you're like a more like highly technical athletes that are doing, say, like ski jumping, or anything with like tricks and aerials and things like that, it could be figure skating too, like can go through their whole routine or the thing that they're going to attempt in their mind. And what I learned from them is that if they can't see themselves doing it, they may be visual, they may be kinesthetic, or they may be, however they imagine it. If they can't imagine themselves doing it, they won't attempt it. They have to be able to like kind of go through it in their body, in their mind, however it is that they do that, in order to feel comfortable even attempting something new. And I think that's a good lesson, because there's something about like where there's a blank spot there that indicates that somehow that ability isn't quite there yet. And sometimes people just say, I don't care, I'm going to go and try it anyway. And they might get barreled, like they might like, or they might get, they might get whipped, they might get injured. They're willing to take that chance. But it seems like a good trick to know that when you get to like even like high professional level, Olympic level, that this seems to be a very common experience among these highly trained athletes, that they will do the imagery in advance and check. And if they can't quite feel it, see it, imagine it, that they know that there's other things that they need to work on or learn, like they got to fill in those blank spaces before they're willing to actually do it. And then once, obviously, and this is a big topic, but there's levels of what's the word, like not anxiety, it's like levels of excitement. That's not the right word either. I'm missing the word. I'll try to think of it, but like arousal actually is the right word. There's levels of arousal that are optimal for performance, and it's not super relaxed and it's not super anxious and fearful. It's somewhere in the middle, and everybody kind of knows, especially if they're experienced, they know where they need to be. So we often use like a dial as an image to play with, to get somebody ready for optimal performance. So we'll say like, okay, if you need to be at like a 7.5, because that's when you feel like really like, let's go really relaxed. Like, okay, that's like a 0, and like 10 is like amped. I'm too tense. Okay, the person says like, I need to be like a 7.5. So then they know that in their warm up and their lead up, and like as they're getting ready to do their route or do their run or like whatever it is, that check where they are. So like, let's say they're at a 5. Okay, let's just like, okay, so now just like go inside and just like tune that to just like a 5.1. And interestingly, like whichever way you start turning the dial, once you start turning it, it automatically will keep going toward that level. And then just like getting them to check in again, 2 minutes later, it's like, okay, where am I at now? Okay, now I'm at like a 5.7. Okay, let's just like allow that to keep turning up. And then when they get to that like 7, you want to time it, right? So you're kind of like at that 7.5 right at the moment that you're about to do what it is you're going to do. But even just giving somebody that image of understanding that they have that ability to, like, you can do it right now. If I tell you right now, like, find that dial, and let's say like we want to be like just 0.1 more relaxed. Okay, say you're at a 5 and just turn it down to like a 4.9. You can do it.
Yep, absolutely.
Right? So we all have that. It's just like knowing that it's there, and then deciding to turn it. And then you can get yourself to, if you're doing sports, for example, exactly where you want to be. You can use that for anything. Obviously, you can use it if you're going on a date.
Zach, you want to add to that?
It's a really good idea. It's a really good idea, actually. Yeah, I could definitely use that.
Yeah. And once you're in flow, which is like flow states happen when the level of challenge, sorry, I'm blocking my face. The level of challenge and our ability are like, the level of challenge just exceeds our current ability. That's when we enter flow states. So if something's too easy for you, you'll feel apathetic, bored, like lazy, like less energy. If something's too challenging, you'll feel frustrated, overwhelmed, overly anxious. If something's just challenging enough, then when you're doing it, you'll enter flow. And once you're in flow, like that is the absolute epitome of fearlessness, right? There's zero fear in flow. You may feel excited. You may feel not excited at all. Like I know Alex Honnold, who's like you may know, he's a world famous climber. He free soloed El Capitan in Yosemite. It's like one of the most incredible feats of human, athleticism. And he did this 60 Minutes interview years ago, and they asked him, if he gets scared when he's doing his free solo stuff. Free solo, for people that don't know, is like climbing without any equipment. So you're just like on the rock, your feet, your hands, and you're just not,
and no ropes.
No rope. Yeah. So I don't know how tall El Capitan is, but it's thousands of feet, I guess. Like it's ridiculously, or hundreds? No, maybe not thousands. I don't know. We'll have to look it up after. Somebody can fact check in the chat. But anyway, it's a huge climb, and people didn't think it was possible to free solo it. This guy did. When they asked him, does he feel tense? Like, does he get scared while he's doing his climbs? He said, absolutely not. If I'm feeling scared or like even like agitated or anxious, like something's very wrong. His heart rate stays low, he's calm, and you can watch him. Like you can see from his body movements and how fluid they are that he's not scared.
He's in flow state.
Yeah. Hopefully that's all helpful imagery.
There we go. At more than 3,000 feet above the valley floor, 2.5 times tall, the Empire State Building.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Michelle.
Wow.
Yeah, right? And he's got no fear, but he's a very unique guy to watch be interviewed too. So
yeah.
Anyways.
But the other thing I'll say is like he's a bit unusual in that, like, I don't know how much fear he ever encounters. Like it's maybe like something different in his brain, honestly. But most athletes, even top tier athletes, professional athletes, feel fear all the time.
Yeah.
They feel fear all the time. They just know how to cope with it. So I think that's important to mention too, is like, especially in meditation and like spiritual circles, I feel like we often think that there's this epitome of like if I'm enlightened, I'm never going to have any of these like uncomfortable feelings that humans have. That's not true. Like, I mean, I can't speak from experience because I'm not enlightened, but like from everything that I understand, you'll always have all these human experiences within this human lifetime. Like feelings don't just stop, and there's no reason to want them to stop, because feelings are not a problem. They're just information. And they're texture and, color, and they're part of what makes life interesting and ever changing. And you're never just feeling one at a time. They're like, there's a mixture. They all have these they're coming from different places, and some of them are like old and like crunchy, and some of them are like, like light and fluffy, and they're all mixing up together in all these different recipes in our bodies all the time. And that's no problem. So like the ultimate, I guess what I'm trying to say is like the apex of like learning about fear is not to never experience fear. It's just experiencing fear and then being okay with it. And then using it or working with it in a way that like could be interesting, or it could just be helpful, or whatever. But like acceptance is a big part of the pie in the first place. Yeah,
absolutely.
Totally agree with you there. Yeah, absolutely. It was one thing I wanted to add as well, where you said, Tanja, about fearing the future and being depressed about the past, one thing that I've found that's been quite helpful in my own experience of working with anxiety about the future is this method of self-inquiry. That's one way of describing it. It's something I would suggest people look into. I think it's Mahatma Babaji, I think, is one person who teaches it. Also Rupert Spira, and even Eckhart Tolle, and so many other. It's like this one spiritual teaching that is essentially mindfulness, just approached from so many different angles by so many different people and spoken about in so many different ways, but it's all talking about the same thing. And it's essentially just when we have a thought that comes up, let's say it's a fearful thought, the practice is to essentially question the thought and question, who is it that has this thought?
Yeah.
And we won't ever really have an answer because the ego doesn't really exist. The ego is a phantom. And the more we do this self-inquiry of asking, where does this thought come from? We'll always get the same answer, which will be basically from nowhere. And we won't really have an answer. And the more we do this, the more the mind will integrate into our being. The ego will integrate into the whole of our being. And the less we'll even think, the more we'll just constantly be in flow. And to me, that is kind of a scary premise at this time in my life, like the idea of no longer having logic and just relying purely on spirit to just, surrendering to the divine will, to surrendering to spirit, surrendering to my inner being completely and totally, I think is a wonderful thing. But it's also, the ego doesn't want to let go, and that's the fear. But I just wanted to share that as well.
Love that. Thank you. Yeah, you nailed it though. But it's like, I think that's that practice, that consciousness is emergent from that type of practice, and as that emerges, there's no fear about that emergence. And so it's like, it's interesting. But I love that. Eckhart, you're right, Eckhart Tolle does talk about that, and he had a really good story that was actually a story of Byron Katie's that he told, where it wasn't about fear, it was about like problems. It was like, what's the problem right now, right? Tell me what the problem is right now at this moment. And he tells this story about Byron Katie visiting a lady in the hospital who's had some kind of surgery, so one of her legs, I think, is a lot longer than the other. And Byron Katie says, so what's, this woman's really emotional about the situation, and she's like, so what's the problem? And the lady says, can't you see? Look at my legs. And Byron Katie says, oh, I see. So you think that your legs are supposed to be the same length, and that's your problem. And it's kind of like an exaggerated example, but that's sort of the approach, right? It's like, what's really going on here? Where is the problem? Where is the fear? Like, what is it? Like, tell me, where's it coming from?
That is a part of it, of course, isn't it? But then it's like that, to me, is like integrating the ego into oneself in the mental portion of it. That's one aspect of it. But then it's also important for us to focus on the emotional integration as well, and not kind of disregard either of them, I suppose. But yeah, great analogy there. Thank you.
Good point. Yes, and like you said, it's sort of that the questioning of who's even having the question, or who's having this experience, and then that automatically can't be solved, as you said, with the mind, with logic, with thinking. And it's the same approach as a Zen koan, right? Zen koans are like a riddle, like, what is the sound of one hand clapping, that can't be solved logically or with thinking. And so by practicing koans, the idea is that eventually, to solve it, you have to be outside of thinking. And there's no way to grasp it with our usual mental ways. And so that practice alleviates that dynamic of the ego thinking it's somehow managing the whole situation.
Absolutely.
So we're almost out of time, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. That was amazing.
Thanks, Tanja.
Zach, can you tell people how they can reach you, please?
Absolutely. You can go to zachhater.com. That's one way to do that. Also, if you just type in my name on Facebook, I'll come up and just send me a message. That's ZACH and then HAYTER. But as I said, I might get a name change soon. But yeah,
I kind of like it though that
anymore.
Zach Hater speaks about love.
Yeah, he's gonna be Zach Lover next.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's such a, maybe that's the paradox. Maybe that's what I'm supposed to do. But anyway.
Yeah. And Sylvia, how about you?
I also have a website. If you Google me, you'll find me. I'm all over the place. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on, probably not on Facebook. I don't usually connect that much on Facebook, to be honest. But I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn, and yeah, feel free to reach out.
And Sylvia's last name is spelled Rayner, Rayner.
Yeah.
Sylvia Rayner.
Indeed. I didn't put it in the chat. My bad.
Yeah, no worries. I'm just going to type it in the chat here too. And then myself, Adventures for Connection. And Rain is my partner in that. And actually, our goal is to connect consciousness with spirit. And we're working on hosting retreats and for practitioners to host retreats in spaces that we've curated, so to speak. So right now, those spaces are local and we hope to be global at some point. But you can reach me on Facebook and Instagram with just my name, because it's Tanja Powell, Tanja. And then thank you, Michelle. Scrolling along the bottom is adventuresforconnection.com. So, and that's also a work in progress. So we'd love to connect with anyone that has further questions. Really appreciate y'all being here today. Michelle, you come back in?
I'm back in. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you, Zach, for being here as well.
There she is.
A little surprise for him, a little discussion there. But I'm so glad that you came on. And Sylvia, thank you so much for the amazing information for everybody out there. And if you just popped on, definitely, if you can go back to the replay to watch it, that would be great. So thank you, everybody, for being here on Soul Treats today, Sunday. And just truly grateful for everything that you all do for humanity. So thanks so much. Have a great one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everybody.